Greetings Pathfinders, and welcome back to our coverage of Rise of the Runelords. It's time for Part 3, the Hook Mountain Massacre. Now before you get worried, this obviously refers to the massacre of a rack of ribs and a fully smoked pig at the local Hook Mountain barbecue. No atrocities or crimes against nature here, just a bit of wholesome family fun after the grim and gruesome troubles we all faced last time. Now everyone get out your dice. 1E players, roll me a sense motive check. 2E players, give me a perception check. Rules as written, this is a secret check, but I'll let you roll it just this time. Let me know what your check results are in the comments. So, anyone that can beat a 22 knows that, well, let's just say when Hook Mountain has a rack of ribs, it's made of long pork. So let's briefly talk giants. As the name implies, they are humanoids, but big. The rest is dictated by their culture and heritage, but there is one thing you can generally keep in mind. Height makes right. The larger a giant is, the more authority they are seen to have. Partly because the larger giants are stronger and usually have access to more fantastical powers, and by that same logic, the smaller giants are seen as weaker and lower down on the pecking order. And ogres are some of the smallest giants. Some legends say ogres aren't even fully giants. They're said to be the result of a giant and a human mixing, producing horrifying offspring. Ogres have a high rate of birth irregularities and malformed mutations, arms and legs with wildly incorrect proportions, vestigial limbs, strange growths, it runs the entire spectrum. One of the goals of Rise of the Runelords was to introduce the world to the Pathfinder version of iconic creatures. Book 1 gave us the now iconic Paizo goblins, Book 2 showed off their spin on the undead, and now Book 3 is giving us Paizo's take on ogres. And that take is a very backwoods rendition of The Hills Have Eyes. Now don't get me wrong, it's a good hook, makes for a memorable set piece at the start of the book certainly, but there's some ugly underlying implications here. And that can be a difficult edge to walk. I'm going to be as considerate as I can with my language regarding all this, and I urge GMs to read this carefully and talk to their players if they think there might be any weirdness coming up. Speaking of which, trigger warnings. This adventure contains themes of incest and assault. I'll post up times for that now, and I will try to keep the details of that to a minimum. Now we had all that ogre talk because Hook Mountain in Varesia has long been home to a large clan of ogres, the Kriegs. They control the mountain and rule the lesser clans that live in the woods below, and by rule I mean yell at and make them do things for us. Because these ogres are, at their core, bullies. Among giants, they know they are smaller and weaker, looked down upon, so they shift that anger downwards at the creatures they can bully, like humans. But of course, humans are more than capable of punching up and over their weight class. The Order of the Black Arrow proved that 40 years ago. Founded and funded by Magnimar at the request of nearby Turtleback Ferry, the Order built Fort Rannick and took the fight to Hook Mountain. The ogres suffered staggering losses and broke, unable to mount a unified force against the human settlements. Individuals or small groups in the wilderness are still in danger, but the settlements and farms are safe. And thanks to Karzuk's minions, that's all about to change. Or rather, it's been changing here for years now. Turtleback Ferry was a pretty sleepy little place. Home to less than 500 people, it's the kind of place that's important to the immediate region, but getting anyone from a bigger city to find it on a map is an impossible challenge. But if you're willing to shake pockets and grease palms, you can find greed anywhere. And that's what Lucretia came here to do. Unlike Zanisha's approach, this Lamia didn't want to just grab people and kill them. She wanted to refine it, build up a higher grade of sin. So she opened a casino, a nice little floating pleasure barge called Paradise. For just a little entrance fee, people could come in and play a few games, have a little fun, and if you keep coming back, well, it only makes sense to get the VIP membership. It's just a small little tattoo, easily hidden because you don't want your neighbors to know what you're up to on the weekends. Just get this simple 7-pointed star and you can enjoy all the perks of Paradise. Lower entry fees, cheaper drinks, access to the off-menu options, and some private back rooms, if you know what I mean. It's a hell of a deal. Lucretia has 200 greedy souls, marked and ready to feed the Runewell. The greed in their soul is homegrown and ripe for the plucking. Her magical charm likely greased the wheels when it came to getting things set up, but it's not useful for the rest of her plan. Sin is only a sin if it's a choice after all. A bad choice, but I mean, who hasn't made a few of those? It's not like one person's desires for nice company and extra cash could have horrible consequences, right? Back to those ogres. Lucretia isn't the only minion of Karzuk that's come to the area. Hook Mountain was visited by the stone giant Barl Breakbones, an appropriate name because he broke many ogre bones, establishing who was in charge. The old patriarch Grolki Krieg was one of the first to fall, and the current patriarch Jagrath Krieg is much more accommodating. Barl now rules the ogres and has ordered them to marshal, getting ready for war on behalf of Makmurian and Karzug. But what about Fort Rannick? Surely the rangers there noticed there was something going on and tried to stop it. Well, yeah, they did. The Krieg's forges were working overtime to make weapons, producing a lot of greasy smoke, which the Rangers investigated. Unfortunately, the scouts weren't as stealthy as they should have been, and got caught. Furious at the intrusion, Barl decided it was time to take care of Fort Rannick. And here's where it all ties together. The Rangers of Fort Rannick were professionals, but also people. They could be lured by vice same as anyone. Caven Windstrike was easy to lure. Easy money and easy company appealed to him greatly, and Lucretia recognized an opportunity. Her charms, magical and otherwise, convinced Caven to loosen his lips and do a few favors. From him, she learned that Fort Rannick's commander was carrying on a romance with a nymph in the nearby woods, meaning there'd be a night where he was away from the fort and highly vulnerable. She convinced Caven to delay his own patrol the night before the commander's usual meeting, so many of the best defenders were gone from Fort Rannick. The ogres assaulted the location and the commander's rendezvous, massacring everyone involved. Fort Rannick has fallen, and no one yet knows it. Now that all sounds pretty bad, but don't worry, it gets worse. See, there's one last part of Lucretia's plan she needs to execute. The execution. See, the problem with souls is that they stay in their bodies until death, and her marked sinners are all still alive. So she needs to create a disaster to destroy Turtleback Ferry and send all those souls to the Runewell. And so she's concocted a plan. Lucretia sank the Paradise one night, killing 24 as an appetizer, and headed to Fort Rannick. Now she plans to use a coven of hags to accelerate the coming winter storms, creating a devastating flood as the ancient dam of Skull's Crossing fails at a critical moment. Turtleback Ferry will be destroyed in a horrible natural disaster, and there will be no one prepared to stop Karzug's return. But of course, the last time around, the PCs uncovered Zanisha's plot and found the note from her sister pointing them towards Turtleback Ferry, and they're about to get another incentive to investigate this growing conspiracy, which we'll go over now in... Part 1. In the Hook's Shadow. So talking about the timeline, this adventure presumes it's been a few months since the Swallowtail Festival. This part takes place right around the onset of winter, early enough to avoid snow, but late enough that winter storms have started rolling in. Now if the PCs simply took the bait from Part 2, they can just head to Turtleback Ferry no problem. But if they need motivation and extra reward, or just a reason to hurry up, they are approached by agents of Magnimar's mayor. Lord Mayor Groberus has heard of their exploits in Sandpoint and here in Magnimar. He may have even determined that the PCs have, in a roundabout way, saved his life. Having shown they can handle themselves, he approaches the PCs for a favor. It's been a while since Magnimar has gotten a report from the Order of the Black Arrow. He doesn't want to deal with investigating something that far away, so he offers 750 gold plus expenses to have the PCs do it instead. Not a bad deal. Whatever reason the PCs have to head out, as they prepare for departure, a familiar face approaches them. Shalilu Andosana, the Elven Ranger from Book 1, makes a return here. She wants to accompany the PCs to Fort Rannick for personal reasons. One of the rangers who serves the Black Arrow is a man named Jakardros Sovark. For a long time, Jakardros and Shalilu's mother Sianthia were lovers. Shalilu wasn't sure what her mother saw in the man, but they were both happy, which is all that really mattered. Though their relationship was a scandal in the town of Crying Leaf, Shalilu accepted her new stepfather. Then, Siantha died in a dragon attack. Jakardros left and never returned, and now Shalilu wonders if he ever loved her mother at all. So after years of wandering, she wants to finally confront him about this. She asks to accompany the PCs, and both I and the adventurer assume they agree to let her follow along. If for whatever reason your characters don't, she'll probably just follow them anyway out of sight. The trip to Turtleback Ferry takes a good bit of time. 2 weeks if the PCs walk, 1 week if they travel by river or secure mounts. Magical transportation, like teleportation, is still beyond the PC's power level at this point. For reference, 1st edition Pathfinder had teleport as a 5th rank spell, while 2nd edition bumps it up to 6th. Either way, that's between levels 9 and 11, and the PC should start this adventure at level 7. They should hit the 10 to 11 range by the end, so the trip back to Sandpoint or Magnimar could be faster, but at the start, it's slow going. Now when the PCs arrive at Turtleback Ferry, there's nothing really amiss. Lucretia covered her tracks very well, and if the PCs ask around about her, the townfolks assume that she died in the horrible tragedy that sank her boat one night, along with many townsfolk. No one openly displays a Sihedron tattoo, since Lucretia advised people to be discreet about their mark. The best the PCs can see is a flash of ink on a forearm. If they can get someone to talk, they'll get a story of a person that just wanted a bit of fun and gambling, maybe some time away from a hard job with some soft company. That kind of stuff everyone does, but no one really talks about, you know? Might be a few don't tell my wife, don't tell my husband thrown in there for good measure. What the townsfolk don't know is that 210 people currently have this mark, or that it means their souls are forfeited to the Runewell. It can be erased with magic, but that would need 210 separate castings. To put this in perspective for logistical reasons, a 1st edition wizard has 4 rank 1 spell slots. With a high intelligence score, they can possibly get 2 bonus spell slots per day. That's 6 castings per day at most. Even if they use every spell slot they have, that's only 14 casts a day. Now, 1st edition wands have 50 charges, so that might be a better idea, but a 1st rank wand costs 750 gold. That's the entire reward from this trip just to remove 1/4 of the tattoos, and the PCs don't know how many people are marked. It'll take time to track everyone down, which they don't have. Lucretia's plan will go off in just a few days. Additionally, she won't know the PCs are removing marks, so she'll just destroy the town regardless, assuming it'll still work. It won't power Karzug as much, but 400 people at least will still be dead. I bring this up because, as the PCs get higher in level and more capable of doing fantastic things, it's important to keep scale and scope in mind. Magic can fix a lot, but it can't always fix everything fast, so keeping players focused on what they can do is important, and knowing why a specific plan might be unworkable can help with that, especially if a PC is set on this kind of plan. Giving logical numbers like this can make it feel like it's a realistic fact of the situation, instead of a GM saying, no, you can't do that, you have to go do these fights instead. With that tangent out of the way, let's have the PCs go do some fights. However long the PCs spend in Turtleback Ferry, they will eventually want to head to Fort Rannick. As they walk along the road there, the sound of a wounded cat can be heard in the woods. If the PCs don't investigate, they will later hear a group of hunting hounds baying, along with a horrible voice singing off-key about eating kitty cat pie. The kitty cat in question is Kib, Jakardros' Firepelt Cougar animal companion. 3 weeks ago, when Fort Rannick was hit, Jakardros was out on patrol with several other rangers, including Vale Temos and Caven Windstrike. Caven, as you recall, is a filthy traitor and has kept the entire party delayed in the wilderness so Fort Rannick could fall more easily. As a result, that patrol has now been captured by Ogrekin living in these woods. Ogrekin are basically what happens when Ogre genetic code frays to the breaking point. Deformity mutations are the norm for them, and the normal side of Ogre society shuns them, which means they tend to congregate together in families that only make these problems worse. And the Grawl family does love to make things worse. Kib has been trying to find someone to help him rescue Jakardros for the last 3 weeks. In that time, the Grawls have whittled the Rangers' numbers down to 3. Now, unless the PCs come to his aid, Kib is about to meet his end. The hunter here is Ruckus Grawl, who has laid out several bear traps hoping to catch Kib. And catch him he has, the PCs finding the fire pelt with his back leg stuck painfully in the jaws of the trap. The way the cat acts should seem immediately unnatural, showing signs of increased intelligence and training. Magical communication is best here, but even without it, Kib is trained enough to lead the PCs back to his master once he's freed. Complicating that is Ruckus showing up a minute later, hunting hounds in tow. The Ogrekin fighter has a deformed right hand, made up of a single large finger. Like most Ogrekin, he's a bully that loves soft targets but hates losing. He'll try to flee if he gets hurt, running back to the Grawl farmstead. If captured, he'll mostly just curse the PCs out unless they can somehow make him friendly. If that happens, he'll show off his blanket. A dirty piece of cloth he keeps tucked into his belt, his mammy recently adorned it with patches from the Black Arrow Rangers they've captured. If Ruckus runs, he's easily followed home. If he dies, Kib can lead the PCs there. Either way, they'll wind up at the Grawl's horrible farmstead, which means it's time to meet the Grawls. 8 Ogrekin make their home here, along with 4 others that we'll cover when we get there. The Grawl's farm is a testament to the resilience of some crops, because frankly nothing should actually be able to grow here. The crop of choice is corn, sickly looking though it is. The husks of previous harvests can be seen hanging from the trees, which the Grawls have used to craft little dolls to ward people off. That probably does work, but the bigger deterrent is the one Grawl that can be found outside the house. Ruckus normally lurks around here too, but if he's retreated, he'll be inside the house recovering. The Grawl stalking the field is called crow food by the family as a joke. His head is squashed and lumpy, looking like a pumpkin. He constantly patrols the cornfield, looking after his crops. Unless the PCs are particularly stealthy, he'll see them approach and attempt an ambush. Crowfoot isn't quiet, but the rest of the Grawls will still stay in the house, alert to intruders, but assuming he'll take care of them. Heading to the main building first, the front has a long, decaying porch, decorated with bone wind chimes and a grotesque rocking chair. This entire porch is a trap. The Grawls never use the main entrance. In fact, most of the front rooms are trapped, the dilapidated look of the house making it harder to actually find out what's intentionally a trap and what's a loose board that could just easily trip you. The Grawls use the side door here, which leads into the kitchen. The house layout is messy, so we're just gonna go in labeled order for the important rooms. Right there is the playpen. 2 Ogrekin spend their time here. Both are fully grown adults, but they act like children. Malgro Grawl has stumpy legs that don't work very well, forcing him to crawl around, while Lucky Grawl was simply born double-jointed, his features otherwise looking almost close to a large human. For this, the rest of the Grawls kind of hate him, and he's left alone in his own filth for days at a time. Neither Grawl is particularly threatening to the PCs. Ruckus has a room here where he can be found if he got away from the PCs, otherwise the room is empty. This large room belongs to the matriarch of the family called Mammy Grawl. Mammy spends most of her time on the bed here, having become very obese. She is attended by the corpses of 3 of her children, which she raised as zombies after the Black Arrows killed each of them. Mammy Grawl is a fairly powerful necromancer whose spells can easily catch the PCs off guard, though thankfully the other Grawls are too afraid of Mammy's retribution to assist her in a fight. If she's on the losing end, she has a short-range teleport to jump outside the house to safety, as well as a fly spell prepared to give her greater maneuverability outdoors. The upstairs, accessed from the stairways located here, paints a grotesque picture of where the Gruul children sleep, but doesn't contain anything notable encounter-wise. Remember, I'm not going to go over everything, so feel free to explore up here. You might find wonderful treasure! The other set of stairs, located here, heads down into the basement. Lurking down here in the trap workshop is Ogre Clans, the oldest of the boys and unfortunately also the father to most of them. He has a pronounced limp from an old injury and not a birth defect like some others, and a vestigial conjoined twin attached to his neck. He also has 2 pet trained donkey rats who live down here with him. Ogre Clans is the one that maintains the traps and furniture in the house and is actually very good at his job, which he has to be considering the quality of his tools and equipment. Ogre will fight the PCs here until he's clearly outmatched. If that happens, he runs to this next room. It's the largest room in the basement and looks like a strange underground greenhouse. Stagnant pools and rotting vegetation are scattered throughout, hiding the room's true denizen. Once, this was Muck Gruul, the most favorite of Mammy's children. Handsome by Ogrekin standards, his life took a turn when he captured a nymph princess. She cursed him as she died, making him rot away into a barely sentient plant creature called a Tendriculus. Mammy's banished him down here for messing up the house, while his family feeds him while mocking his affliction. Muck vaguely recognizes the family and won't attack them, but anyone else is fair game. The last room down here is where the Gruuls store their treasure. The family fortune is stored in a large chest and has quite a few valuables in it. The biggest thing the PCs can find here is a magical bow, enchanted to shoot more accurately and enhance the arrows with electricity. If Shalilu is with the party and shared her backstory, she confirms that it's Jakardros' personal bow. She becomes worried that the Gruuls may have killed and eaten him, or that he might be rotting in an undiscovered room. Speaking of the prisoners, they are located in the barn, along with the last 3 Gruuls. Hogarth, Jetho, and Sugar all lounge around here, drinking horrible moonshine that is better used as paint thinner, or acid, or poison? Anyway, these 3 take their job as prison guards pretty seriously. They won't leave to join any fight in the house unless Mammy teleports outside and demands their assistance. In the room beyond, the 3 Black Arrow Rangers have been stripped and beaten unconscious. All 3 were part of a larger patrol, their comrades having been tortured and eaten over the last 3 weeks. Vale Temros is a dark-skinned man whose family were all also Black Arrow Rangers. His parents died years ago and his brothers died in the Krieg raid. Fueled by anger and a desire for revenge, if he's healed and rearmed, he will fight with reckless abandon, accompanying the PCs if they try to take back Fort Rannick. Siege architecture and engineering are one of his hobbies, and that could prove very useful. Jakardros Sobak is in a very dark place. Before joining the Black Arrows, he was an adventurer. He and his party traveled to Crying Leaf and defended the city from a dragon attack, all of them but him dying in the process. He was nursed back to health by Siantha, an elven priestess of Desna. The 2 of them fell in love and were very happy for a few years. Then that dragon, resurrected by magic, attacked again, killing Siantha. Jakardros killed the dragon a second time but was too broken by grief to remain. He walked away from Crying Leaf and wandered for a time before joining the Black Arrows. The Order's strict regimen did him good, and he rose to a second-in-command of the Rangers. When his group returned to Fort Rannick and found it controlled by ogres, he tried to take it back and lost a third of his men in the attempt. Fleeing into the Kriegwood got them captured and slowly killed, which weighs on him even more. Now he wishes that one of his previous encounters had finally led to his death. So, not a great time to be reunited with his estranged stepdaughter. Before we can cover that awkward conversation though, let's talk about guy number 3. Caven Windstrike is a handsome young man with a silver tongue. He spent his wayward youth doing whatever he wanted and taking the funds to fuel that, until one day he made the mistake of assaulting a man who turned out to be a family friend. His father wanted Caven turned over to Magnimar justice, but his mother convinced his father to take a different option. Caven could join the Black Arrows, who would straighten the boy out. Caven, wanting to avoid jail time, took the Black Arrow option. Now this actually went pretty well for him. The structure and discipline kept him on the straight and narrow. But then Paradise opened. Caven and 2 other Black Arrows snuck down to check it out, and that taste was all he needed to fall back into the life of high-stakes gambling and crime. He volunteered for an easy southern patrol route that gave him ample opportunity to sneak out to Paradise. Lucretia saw the opportunity he presented and charmed the man, magically and physically. Her influence grew to the point that the magic wasn't even needed by the end. Caven betrayed the Black Arrows to her, and Lucretia used that info to slaughter them. Caven's plan had been to escape from his patrol and meet her in Turtleback Ferry, where they would flee together. Lucretia was actually going to kill him there, so his capture actually saved his life. The rest of the Rangers have no idea he gave them up, but that could change when the PCs arrive. See, all 3 men are stripped down to rags, which means that Caven's Sihedron tattoo is exposed. The others had more pressing concerns than to ask about it, and Caven will lie and just say it's an old one if pressed. But that should be enough to sow distrust with the PCs. As the adventure continues, more and more information is going to come to light about Caven's involvement. The man will play along to keep up appearances as long as he can, but if he finds an opportunity, he'll run off to find Lucretia. If he does, well, he'll find out just how badly he's screwed up. The other two rangers won't let him off the hook either. Once they find out, unless there's an immediate reason to postpone, they'll execute Caven on the spot. If you want to do a redemption arc for Caven, it's likely going to have to be a heroic sacrifice kind of redemption arc. Now, if Shalilu is here, she and Jakardros eventually reconcile, and the man does his best to remain in Shalilu's life after things settle down. He'll do what he can to protect her, treating the elven woman like a daughter, even though she's actually older than him. For the next part, you can play up their growing connection as much or as little as you want. It mostly depends on your player's investment in the storyline and how much they want to have Jakardros and Shalilu around as NPCs. But now that we've rescue rangered our Chip, Dale, and Monterey Jack, the PCs have a source on the situation at Fort Rannick and a reason to take it back, so we'll cover that now with Part 2, Retaking Rannick. This part of the adventure can be approached in a lot of ways, and as a game master, you'll have a lot of questions to answer. The first and most important one is what to do with the 3 remaining Black Arrows and Shalilu. When it comes to planning, they're a valuable asset. All 3 rangers know the fort fairly well and have experience fighting the Krieg ogres. Caven might be a traitor, but his info is still good, and he has no reason to lie to the PCs about anything the others would be able to confirm. Vale can provide the PCs with a map of the fort and help draw up attack plans for them, but once it comes down to execution, there's pros and cons to keeping them around. Pros: it makes a lot of story sense for them to go with the PCs. After all, this is their fort and their comrades to be avenged. They can also help with a group that's smaller or not as balanced. If your party is heavy on spellcasters and not frontline fighters, the rangers can help fill that out. They also make good backups if a character dies and you can't bring them back right away. Or if a player has found out that they don't really like their specific class or playstyle at this level, an NPC of a different class can be lent to them and they can maybe see how something else plays. As for cons, 4 NPCs is a lot to keep track of. Even if Caven runs off or dies early for story reasons, 3 is still a lot. These NPCs aren't all the same either. Jakardros is a level 8 ranger, Caven is a level 7 ranger rogue, and Vale and Shalilu are both level 6 ranger fighters with a slightly different class split in terms of levels. That can get very complicated to run as a GM, especially in a big fight where you have lots of enemies to manage too. One tip to cut down on that is to have a PC who is comfortable with it run a character in combat. This can free you up, but also bog down your players. One technique you can use is what I like to call just off to the left. Basically, have the NPCs be handling an enemy or two on their own in combat, kinda just off screen. Make sure the players know you're doing this. This can let you keep the NPC around for story reasons or for backup, but not get caught up in combat. Don't be afraid to mix and match these either, find what works best for your group. For the rest of this video, I'll only bring up an NPC if them being in a scene serves an important purpose. Now there are a couple of ways to assault Fort Rannick. A full frontal assault is a bad idea. The fort has a total of 34 ogres inside, and while not all of them will pour out to fight, a double-digit number of giants can easily overwhelm PCs. Some of these ogres are also a cut above the rest, and 2 or 3 of them in a fight can easily turn things. Most ogres are easily tricked though, and the PCs can definitely lure several into an ambush or even on a wild goose chase around the fort if they're smart. Flight presents a unique option, allowing the PCs a much stronger vantage point. Just keep in mind the ogre's greater height and reach in case a PC flies too low. It can also help with infiltration of the fort, though that needs to be done carefully. Flying people are easy to spot most of the time, and the ogres can see well at night, so slipping in under dark cover is not always a guarantee. In fact, for PCs that can't see in the dark, it makes things much worse. The best option is the pond located here, which supplies the drinking water for the fort. Behind the waterfall is a cave system that can be used to access the grounds of Fort Rannick. The Black Arrows are confident the ogres haven't discovered the secret doors, since they are well hidden and sized for human-sized creatures. The PCs have 3 options. They can head all the way through the old crypts to access the yard behind the walls, use a door just inside the cave to come out just behind a barracks building, or go deeper in the cave to access the fort's basement. The rangers warn the PCs that the cave system is home to a kind of monster called the shock lizard. Annoying to deal with, the Black Arrows keep the lizards around as a natural deterrent. After all, they knew how to deal with these beasts easily. Better to keep them around to ward off other predators or invaders rather than clear them out and risk something less manageable coming inside. We'll deal with the main cave and yard first, then head into the fort and move our way upward through the tunnels. Just beyond the waterfall here, the Black Arrows stored an assortment of emergency weapons in case of a siege. They couldn't get to anything here during the ogre attack, so it's all undisturbed. 2 shocker lizards from deeper in the cave have wandered up here. These small reptiles aren't too dangerous unless they are in large numbers. These 2 will try to shock the PCs before fleeing back to their nest. This room has the passage to the basement, as well as a secret door that leads out just behind a building in the yard the rangers call the New Barracks. Heading deeper in, the PCs pass through an old crypt that the Black Arrows haven't used in years. It filled up a lot more quickly than they originally thought, and rather than expand, the Black Arrows started burning their bodies instead. The last ranger buried here was a man named Lorgus Fenker. Incredibly unpopular, it's believed the accident that led to his death was actually an arranged killing by his comrades. Ironically, it's good that they stopped burying people here, because Fenker rose as a specter after his death and haunts this place, attacking anyone that passes by. He can't leave the crypt, so if the PCs run through they can avoid a fight, but it does make getting back out a lot more dangerous. Fort Rannick had 2 large gate entrances, and the ogres battered down the eastern one in their initial assault. Now that they hold the fort, they've pushed the gate shut and piled up boulders behind it. A single ogre acts as a token guard, since the Kriegs don't think anyone is going to get through here. The southern gate is the one they used to come and go, so it's remained intact. It's also more heavily guarded, with a few ogres under the command of Minktuck Krieg. His name is Minktuck because, and this is super gross, he attaches skinned minks to his jowls. His lower jaw is mostly gone from a fight years ago, so he apparently thinks this is a good substitute. He is incorrect, and I will judge him for it. Unfortunately for the PCs, he's also pretty good at keeping the guards in line, so this gate is well watched. Now, the actual fort and walls of Fort Rannick are well made, but a lot of the buildings in the yard are in less than stellar shape. The old guard post here, for example, has a lot of the foundation eroded away and could collapse from a heavy blow. The 3 ogres stationed here are completely unaware of that. One of them is Kalilop Krieg, an ogre whose knees bend backwards like a goat. If the PCs collapse this building, it does massive damage to anyone nearby, enough to kill the less tough ogres that might be here. It also attracts the attention of everyone in the outer yard. This can be good or bad depending on how it happens. Distraction when we sneak inside? That's good. Accident during a fight that escalates things out of control? That's bad. The tunnel behind there has been blocked by rubble. It once led to a roost of giant eagles that were allied with the Black Arrows, but they unfortunately all died. Most were eaten relatively quickly after the ogres cooked them here. Now the building is serving as a poorly made smoker for several of the rangers' bodies. Jolly Krieg is the best cook among the ogres, which says several things, all of them horrifying. He can be found here preparing a meat pie. Personally, I think he should meet his end instead. Get it? I'm funny. Anyway, the last building of note here is the New Barracks. New is a bit of a misnomer since it's 20 years old. It was built to give the Black Arrow more space for members to reside in the fort. However, they quickly realized this building was a deadly fire trap just waiting to happen. Entirely made of wood, it sits on raised timbers due to the uneven ground, and the space below is used to store excess lumber. The Black Arrows functionally abandoned the building for years, but the ogres are actually bunking down here, partly because the fort proper smells too much like human for them. Tasty, tasty human. Like sleeping in a room that smells like bacon cheeseburgers, I guess. Anyway, a dozen ogres can be found here at any time, a sizable chunk of their raiding party. It's worth pointing out that this building has only one exit, and it's not one that the ogres can easily fit through. Just let that fact, burn itself into your mind. Now, the PCs can enter the fort through the proper front door here, but it's not easy. The ogres broke the door down in their assault and repaired it very poorly. It can't be properly locked, but it sticks badly and requires a lot of strength to open. Instead, we're gonna head back into the tunnels and come into Fort Rannick from below. That's just my organization though, the PCs can get in however they want. The cave system below the fort is home to a large number of shock lizards, originally introduced by one of the rangers decades ago. These reptiles do a lot to keep the vermin population under control, which is why the Black Arrow haven't removed them following that original ranger's passing. They leave the lizards alone during most of the year, but during mating season the Black Arrows burn bitterbark wood chips to prevent the creatures from swarming into the fort, since they hate the smell of the smoke. The PCs can use this to drive the lizards into the fort, but the Krieg ogres can easily squash the small things. The shock lizards will leave the PCs be if they move slowly and quietly, so long as they don't go near the egg nests. If the PCs do agitate them, a dozen lizards will swarm them. They aren't too dangerous, but grouped up like this can do a lot of damage spread out. The secret door here opens to what was once a group of holding cells. Now it serves as the personal chambers to Lucretia, one of the architects of Rannick's doom. She prefers to spend time in her human form, even alone. The state of the room makes it clear she isn't a prisoner here, but her appearance is likely still disarming enough to make most PCs pause and talk. She welcomes them with open arms and offers an opportunity to work for her master instead of against him. Karzuk will return, and Mokmurian will reward those who help with that return handsomely. Lucretia is a charmer and a schemer, and to use a more modern phrase, a messy bitch who lives for drama. If Kaven is still with the group, she'll exploit this to its fullest. The adventure literally says, twist the knife, so you know that's gonna be good. Though she lacks Zanisha's more lethal-looking weapons, her magic is stronger. The Black Arrows make excellent targets for her charm effects, especially Kaven. Just like her sister, she'll flee if the fight turns against her. Able to become invisible and cast the spell Dimension Door, unless the PCs can capture or kill her quickly, Lucretia is likely to escape. If she does, she runs to Hook Mountain to warn Barl Breakbones. While Lucretia is the source of the conspiracy against the town, she isn't required for it any longer. Everything has been set in motion, and killing her here doesn't stop that. It does deprive Karzuk's forces of a powerful sorcerer though, and that's still a victory. The PCs can find the stairs here, which head up to the first floor and come out here. When coming up from below, the first ogre the PCs are likely to encounter resides here, in what was once the infirmary. Now it's the gore-stained art studio of Silas Krieg, an ogre born far too pretty for his father's liking. Half of Silas's head is routinely shaved by Jagrath Krieg, carving away hair and skin alike. Silas lurks here, posing the body of the fort's cleric into grotesque art pieces. Currently he's propped the body into a pose where it appears to be eating its own guts. Tasteful, I'm sure. The second of the artistic Kriegs can be found here in this room, where he uses the dead body of a ranger as a paintbrush. The walls are splattered in bloody gore and crude graffiti. The ogre, Gragavan Krieg, views himself as a poet and is currently writing on the walls. His works would make a Vogon weep with joy at its beauty. But for the rest of you Froods, I'd recommend not looking at it. Sometimes words can hurt you. Moving on, the fort's main armory is located here, stocked with mundane weapons. Anything unique or magical has been taken for use as tribute by the Kriegs. 2 ogres are using the remaining suits of armor to mess around. You know when a toddler tries on their parents' clothes and walks around pretending to work at job and it's adorable? Imagine like the exact opposite of that. On the plus side, these 2 ogres are much less effective combatants with their armor on. And lastly, we have the fort's interior barracks. 4 ogres bicker here over a hollowed out horse's head they all covet for some reason. All I can imagine is one of those horse head masks, you know, the plastic ones that look surprised all the time? Anyway, their arguing keeps them distracted most of the time, so they're unlikely to rush to the aid of any other ogres. Now the stairs that go up to our next level are close to our starting location, so the PCs might head up right away if they come from underground. Meanwhile, if they come from the front door, they'll probably head up first. In fact, it might be hard to get the PCs to check out the lower levels without a little prodding. If they don't want to head down, you can move Lucretia to another encounter location, but be careful. She's very strong, and putting her with another strong encounter can risk it becoming too powerful. On the other hand, if the PCs and their NPC companions are mowing through the fort, adding her to the upper levels might give them the challenge they need. Speaking of the upper levels, the stairs to them come out here. Only a few ogres can be found up here. 2 can be found in the big war room here, draining the blood from 3 Black Arrow bodies. Down here are the commander's quarters, and 2 of Jagrath's children can be found here. Harlock Hookmaw Krieg had his teeth replaced with an iron jaw by his father when he came of age, as a rite of passage. Meanwhile, Dorella Krieg is the only spellcaster among the ogre's forces. She's Jagrath's daughter and companion, considered a seer by the rest of the Krieg family. Her sorcerer spells can make a fight with Harlock much harder, but it's even worse if they are joined by the last person currently up here. Jagrath Krieg is usually found here, in the former chapel dedicated to Aristil. The ogres have desecrated the place, creating a crude altar to Lamashtu instead. Standing 14 feet tall, Jagrath is frighteningly strong and tough, full of supernatural rage. While he isn't the smartest, he is cunning enough to know when to run for aid and can be sadistically sharp when the need arises. Alone, he's hard but beatable. Pair him with a few more ogres or a spellcaster, and that's a hard fight to win. Jagrath rules by might and fear, which the PCs can use to their advantage if they kill him. Displaying his head to his kin can greatly demoralize them, possibly even terrifying them into fleeing. Once they do, it's a simple task to declare Fort Rannick clear. The Order of the Black Arrow technically still survives, but the 2 remaining members aren't enough to hold this place or even get started cleaning it. Turtleback Ferry will give what reinforcements they can, and so will Magnimar once it's notified, but that's going to take time, and the PCs have a much bigger problem on their hands. Or rather, a much bigger problem rising up around their ankles. Part 3. Down Comes the Rain. Weather is something we don't bring up a lot in TTRPGs. Partly that's conservation of detail. If it isn't important, then it doesn't necessarily matter how hot or cold or humid it is. As with all things, this is a general observation, and your group can absolutely be different. But for me, unless there's a mechanical reason to bring up the weather repeatedly, it only comes up once or twice. Another reason is that a lot of adventures take place inside. Thistletop, Foxglove Manor, Fort Rannick, all enclosed spaces. The PCs likely won't notice too much if the rain has been pouring down outside while they kill ogres and try not to think about implications. On a related note, rain has been pouring down outside this entire time. Maybe not exactly on the fort, but in Varesia as a whole. Lucretia's plan to destroy Turtleback Ferry involves a coven of Annis hags who have been using their powerful magic to accelerate the rainfall in the Storval Deep, the large lake that feeds into Claybottom Lake near Turtleback Ferry. Ironically, the Storval Deep was made by Karzug, who quarried out its location to completely eliminate any traces of the town he was born in. He then built what is now Skull's Crossing to act as a dam for that lake. Now Karzug's project will be the instrument of his return. This chapter should happen almost immediately after the PCs have taken Fort Rannick, the first time they return to Turtleback Ferry. If they don't want to return to town for whatever reason, you can have someone from town brave the trip to the fort to inform the PCs that something has gone wrong at the dam and the town is being flooded. Now the plan was to just have the hags raise the water level, then have the Krieg ogres break open the dam. That's not exactly what happened due to a few complications. The biggest issue is that the dam was occupied by a group of trolls called the Skull Takers, who were not happy about the intrusion or destruction of their home. The ogres and trolls have fought several skirmishes that reduced both their numbers. The ogres initially had more fighters, but the trolls are hard to kill due to their natural regeneration. Lacking acid or fire, the ogres only turned the tide when they figured out they could throw the dead trolls over the side, drowning them. That gave the ogres enough time and room to continue their work, which attracted the lake monster. Black Mega is an ancient spawn of Lamashtu who lived in the deep for thousands of years. The vibrations of the ogre's hammering reverberated deep through the water, waking her up. Seeing plump and juicy prey near her shore, Black Mega threw herself at the dam to feast, which broke part of it. Now she and the waters are tumbling down, threatening to drown Turtleback Ferry. In all honesty, this should look more dangerous than it is. Most of Skull's Crossing is still intact and functional. The first flood is a big sustained rush, but it's going to run out eventually. Still, without all the contact, it's going to appear incredibly dangerous. The PCs can do several things to help save the town. By now they have access to stronger than average magic and skills that normal people can only dream of. Feel free to make up some fun heroic moments for the PCs to shine. The adventure gives an example of saving some school children, which is a pretty great way to feel heroic. It's a good way to inflate their egos for this next part too, when they see just how big the fish in this pond can be. Black Mega is heavily injured from her fall, and that's the biggest advantage the PCs have. Normally, she's a CR 15 creature, suitable for a party almost double their level. Even missing almost 100 hit points, it's likely impossible for the PCs to kill her or even meaningfully hurt her. Her madness-inducing breath weapon can easily end a fight in one round. However, she's a confused predator that's just had something unexpected happen, so she isn't interested in sticking around. She'll flee after 4 rounds of combat, regardless of the situation. Any PC foolish enough to chase her, well, you can always hand them Shalilu for the next few sessions. Once she leaves, the floodwater should also start slowing, giving the village some reprieve. Now that the immediate danger is past, the citizens of Turtleback Ferry hail the PCs as heroes, doubly so if they learn about the fate of Fort Rannick and the PC's success in retaking it. The next obvious step is to ask the PCs to investigate Skull's Crossing and make sure it's intact. If they seem hesitant, the town will scrape together a reward to incentivize them. If the PCs think it's a distraction or would rather focus on Hook Mountain, you can have the surviving Black Arrows urge them on. They need time to gather recruits and send word to Magnimar, so Fort Rannick will hold for a few days now that the main Ogre force is defeated. When the PCs head to Skull's Crossing, it's obviously in a damaged state. The reason for the name should be obvious, as skull motifs dominate the structure, the 5 large skulls on the front being the biggest, though the rightmost one is obscured by a torrent of water still spilling out. These aren't just decorations, as an examination shows that each skull face can open its mouth, acting as a sluice gate to control the water level of the Storball Deep. No one from town knows how this ancient Thessalonian construction works, or why it's not working now, just that it always seemed to work before. The damage Black Mega did is bad, but not catastrophic just yet. The PCs heading up to the dam will need to head through a nearby cave system where a 2-headed giant called an Etten lairs. Named Gorger and Chaw, this Etten has been allied with the trolls for years, happy to live in this cave and guard the dam in exchange for tribute. On top of the dam, the remaining Ogre demolition crew tries to continue their work, but they are severely undermanned at this point. Their original 24 ogres have been cut down to 5, led by Malgus Krieg. Malgus is already on the verge of cutting and running, his whole party exhausted. Compared to the ogres at Fort Rannick, these should be pretty easy pickings. Moving inside the dam, only 4 regular trolls remain from the Skull Takers. They skulk in here, metaphorically licking their wounds. They'll attack the PCs the same as they would the ogres. They are not at all interested in negotiating and fight to the death. Farther down in the dam, the leader of the Skull Rippers lurks. He's an aquatic troll called a Scrag named Grazul, who the other trolls consider their ruler. Grazul is highly confident in his ability to win if he's in water, unless the PCs can turn his regeneration off, at which point he will flee into the Storball Deep through the water tunnels in this room. Once he flees or is killed, the PCs are free to explore. The control room for the dam is located here and is guarded by an ancient Thessalonian construct called a Skull Ripper. Lovely little thing. It guards the room with an intelligent cunning, making for a dangerous foe. Lastly, we have the power source for the dam, a room with 2 magical circles. One is empty, but the other holds a horrible devil. A pit fiend of great power is sealed here, and it's nowhere near as deadly as it looks. See, what the PCs have found is the dam's power source. Eons ago, 2 pit fiends resided here. The magic circles they are sealed in drain their power whenever the sluice gates need to open. This effect isn't inherently deadly, but there's always a chance the energy drain becomes permanent every time it happens. And, well, you gotta roll a 1 on your saving throw at some point, and every failure makes it easier to fail the next time. Over centuries, the devil of Axiel has been reduced to a wreck. He's too weak to do much but beg for help. The magic trapping him is hard to dispel or disrupt, but if the PCs do so, Avaxiel teleports away immediately. This is actually quite bad. Right now, the dam isn't working because the other pit fiend, who was imprisoned in the opposite circle, died from the strain of running the dam. Both circles need to be full for the dam to work. It doesn't have to be a pit fiend or even a summoned creature. Anyone can stand in the other circle, which automatically activates the sluice gates and saves the town. This will kill Avaxiel, but he's an unrepentant monster who will hunt the PCs down and kill them if they free him, so I'm not losing much sleep over that. Now, if the PCs do free Avaxiel, that presents some problems. Doing so by disabling the magic circle just means you need 2 people to get drained instead of 1. Mortals can enter and leave the circles at will, so there's no long-term harm here. If they destroyed the circle, well, that means the dam has no power and they're out of luck. Additionally, once Avaxiel is gone, through leaving or dying, the dam now has no inherent power source. That's not an immediate problem, since the PCs will be taking care of the source of the extra rain soon, but it is something that will be a problem eventually. You might actually be able to get a good bit of fun roleplay out of this logistical issue. For most groups though, once the gates are opened and the flood prevented, they'll be looking to end the problem of the Hook Mountain Ogres once and for all. But before they head to Hook Mountain, there's one more loose end they need to clear up. Part 4. The Haunted Heart. So while at Fort Rannick, the PCs were able to find many things. One of those, hidden in the commander's quarters, was the journal of Black Arrow leader Lamitar Braden. A serious man with a surprising poetic streak, Lamitar had a secret he was keeping from everyone. Once a month, he would go on a communion walk into the Shimmerglens, a swampy area near the Sanos Forest. The border between the universe and the First World is thin here, with numerous Fae making their homes. At the heart of the swamp lived a nymph named Mariana. Beautiful and graceful, she and Lamitar were lovers. Once a month, they would meet and spend time together before Lamitar's duty to the Black Arrow forced him back to the fort. It wasn't perfect, but they were happy. Then Lucretia ruined it. Caven didn't know what Lamitar was doing exactly, but he did know about the regular trips the commander took and roughly where it was going, and so the Lamia was able to lay an ambush, luring the two of them out by attacking the tree of a local dryad. Though the nymph and the ranger were able to kill those ogres, Lucretia's party was able to surround and overwhelm them after that. Lamitar was captured and forced to watch as the ogres tore his lover apart, the sight driving him mad. He was taken to Hook Mountain for torture and interrogation. Now, death to the Fae is not the same as death to a mortal. Mariana rose as a ghost, reborn from the intense despair of watching her lover be carried away. She longs to give him a second chance at life, but she cannot, and so her despair darkens her domain and all within it. While the Black Arrows are keen to know their commander's fate, the PCs might not care all that much. Certainly if they find his diary and want to investigate, that's wonderful, and you can lead the party to this part easily. But if they don't, well, that's totally valid. Not every group is going to care about the same thing. A party that wants to do dungeon crawls and focus on their character from a mechanical perspective will likely not care too much about things that aren't going to lead towards that type of gameplay. This could feel like a wasted side quest to them, without the right incentives or the right push. This is why it's important to know what's necessary information for the future and what's an interesting detail that can add depth, but won't be hurt if it gets missed. And while this does have a few consequences going forward, if your group really doesn't seem interested, you're free to skip this part. If you do want to include this part and need something to pull your group here, may I introduce you to Yap. A pixie, Yap can either seek the PCs out or be sent to find them by Mariana. Either way, he will tell them about the nymph's condition and how badly it's affecting the surroundings. He'll beg them to accompany him to the Shimmerglens to meet with her and hear her request. The Shimmerglens don't have any true encounters, but it does have a few suggested set pieces to build a mood with. You can use as many or as few of them as you want. It's a great way to pad the start or end of a session. The PCs eventually arrive in the Shimmerglens and are greeted with the pained, melancholy scream of a manifesting ghost. Mariana is a rolling maelstrom of emotion, something that she can't properly control. While she isn't malicious to the PCs, she doesn't have control to shield them from her natural abilities, and they might end up stunned or blinded unintentionally. When they speak to her, Mariana is almost inconsolable. She regrets that she couldn't save her lover and thinks the only way to make amends is to return his dead body to life. She should be able to reincarnate him, but something is preventing it from working. She wants the PCs to find out what that is and stop it. If they try to propose alternatives, like that he may have survived, Mariana insists that he must be dead. He would never leave her like this if he lived. We'll get into Lamitar's fate when we see him soon. Mariana doesn't offer any kind of reward beyond the fact that restoring her lover will let her pass on and restore the natural beauty of this area. If the PCs try to destroy her, she will fight back as best she can. She'll eventually return after a day has passed, even if they defeat her in combat, so putting her to rest is the only way to solve this problem. If they don't agree to help her and simply leave, she will send Yap after them. The pixie will obey her order, but is clearly smart enough not to bother the PCs to the point of retaliation. As I said, read your table in regards to this encounter and feel free to change or omit it based on player interest. However it gets cleared up, that's the last thing between the PCs and their final confrontation in the last section. Part 5, Harrowing the Hook. Getting to the Hook Mountain clan hold involves a long and tedious climb up the mountain. The Kriegs use a series of hunting trails to come and go, which the PCs can traverse quite easily. This is a good place to sprinkle in random encounters if you're using XP and want the PCs a little stronger, or if you want to sell the size of the Ogre Clans still fighting them. Some PCs might feel like they've already faced the best the clan has to offer since they've killed Jagrath and Lucretia. And that has dealt a blow to the Kriegs for sure, but Barl Breakbones doesn't care, and he's pushing the remains of the clan to continue working under threat of death. Barl's anger is the reason the two ogres that guard the entrance to the cave system are on alert. Moving into the cave, the Krieg ogres display proof of their ancestors' power. The bones of a dead blue dragon adorn this entrance, while a statue of a strange giant stands just beyond that. This statue is actually the preserved corpse of a rune giant, a kind of giant that the Runelords used to maintain control over the large caste of slaves they had. When Absalom fell, this rune giant descended onto Hook Mountain and controlled the ogres here for the remainder of his life. The leader before Jagrath claimed to be his direct descendant, which, it could be true. The main clan currently holds 13 ogres and one hill giant they have... adopted is the wrong word because they mostly treat him like crap, but he thinks he's adopted, so I guess family is what you make of it. The Kriegs have long been allies and consorts with a coven of Anishags named Briselda, Grothaga, and Larastine. They aren't fully confident in Barl's leadership of the clan, but aren't ready to cut ties just yet. After all, the stone giant gives them such wonderful things to play with. They'll fight the PCs if confronted, but will flee if things go poorly. As a coven, they have access to some pretty powerful magic, and in a pinch, they can call on any remaining Krieg ogres or the next creature we'll discuss. Lamitar Baden is dead, but his body moves, animated by Barl Breakbone's necromancy. He was given to the coven as a gift, but they have him guarding the old shrine of Lamashtu here because they think Barl is using him to spy on them. So long as the white remains here, Lamitar's soul is trapped and could not move on or be resurrected. Now if the PCs kill him and return the body to Mariana, her intense love for him allows her to reincarnate the man, even though that shouldn't be possible within the bounds of the spell. He was dead for too long, and undeath interferes with the process even after re-killing them. But she makes it work, sacrificing herself in the process. The returned Lamitar vows not to waste his new life, becoming the wild protector of the Shimmerglens in honor of his lover. But back in the present, Barl Breakbone still remains, lording over Hook Mountain. He's grown to enjoy the power he holds here, to the point of delaying his return to Makmurian so he can extend his stay. He used to have 2 other stone giant bodyguards, but one made the mistake of pointing out Barl's delaying. Now there is one smarter bodyguard left. If she fled Fort Rannick, Lucretia is also here, and Barl will order her to help slay the PCs. As a stone giant necromancer, Barl can be a real threat, but his arrogance and laziness are big weak points. He's not above begging for his life if he thinks the PCs will spare him. If they do, he'll spill everything about Makmurian's plans going forward, the most important part of that plan being a raid on the town where this all started. Barl will show the PCs this note, or they can find it while searching his things after the fight if they have him killed. Makmurian is having his giants, along with a dragon ally, raid Sandpoint for something that Karzug wants. Whatever it is, they are marching to get it, and unlike the goblin raid from earlier in the year, this one will be coordinated and much deadlier. This note doesn't have a timetable, but considering what it says, the raid is likely very soon. And thus ends the Hook Mountain Massacre. The PCs not only have a more concrete idea of who they're fighting, they have a ticking clock hurrying them home, as the Stone Giant raid could hit Sandpoint any day. We're halfway through Rise of the Runelords, and it's time for the stakes to get higher and the enemies to get deadlier as we enter into the Fortress of the Stone Giants. Thank you for watching Part 3, Pathfinders. I hope you enjoyed it. This part is a lot more of a gruesome dungeon crawl than the last one. What did you think of Paizo's spin on ogres? I get what they were going for, but I don't think they walked the line as well as they have with other situations. Sometimes it felt a little too much like being dark and messed up just for the sake of it. I think it would have worked out just as well without going into full detail about the ogres having a straight line family tree. Still, there's a lot of good horror to be had here and some nice combat-heavy dungeons as a balance to last time's Foxglove Manor. The hardest part of an adventure path is the middle 2 books, because it can easily feel like things are being padded or drawn out, and while this book does have a few bits that feel less important than others, I think it does a good job of escalating stakes too. The PCs are ending this adventure at level 10, that's Change Big Things levels of power, and they will go on to get even stronger. So it makes sense to really start upping their stakes. Thank you all for watching, I really appreciate it. Do all the YouTube things, that's like, comment, and subscribe, but I hate saying that phrase, and look forward to the next part. A big thanks to my Patreon members, you all rock, and until we meet again, Pathfinders, explore, report, and cooperate.